God, I really don't want to watch this, but you know, I put it in the title. We gotta do it. I have to do it. Okay. So Tucker Carlson is still doing his show on Twitter after getting booted from Fox News, even though Fox has sent him a cease and desist. And honestly, I have to thank Fox, not because it sent him a cease and desist, and I'm aligning with Fox on a level of, oh, I want Fox to, you know, stop their competition, but on a level of, even if this wasn't the point, they are trying to save America from brain tumor development, as we have such a poor healthcare system. And the more people watch these Tucker Carlson Tonight segments on Twitter, the more it's exposed to, the more people in this country are going to need intrusive medical care to deal with the damage that it does. And so Tucker Carlson has decided that he wants to give a whole new generation of Americans brain tumors by releasing another segment on Ukraine. Now, all of Tucker's segments on Ukraine, quite frankly, have been garbage. Whether it was during Fox, when he was saying that for every Russian soldier that dies, 7 Ukrainian soldiers die. Complete nonsense, complete misinformation that he just regurgitated on his show, Russian propaganda that he never corrected. And in fact, when he had somebody else come on, RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr. comes on his show, repeats the same thing, also doesn't correct them. Fox News doesn't care. But then he gets off of Fox News, gets kicked out of Fox News, and it's only gotten worse. With his Ukraine segments getting worse and worse and worse. And so now he's released another Ukraine segment, and I haven't watched any of it. Actually, I think I've watched the first 30 seconds, but I haven't watched any more than the first 30 seconds. And I wanted to go into this completely unaware with what he's going to say. With the knowledge of his historical statements on Ukraine and what he said in the past, I am not encouraged by the fact that he continues to talk about it, but I'm excited to watch this one. That's a lie. I'm not excited. This is going to be painful, but it's what you guys want me to do, so I'm going to do it. Episode 7, irony alert, the war for democracy enables dictatorship. Okay, let's hear it.
A good reason. Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. You may have found yourself wondering recently, as the world slides closer to nuclear annihilation than any time in human history, why exactly are we at war with Russia?
By the way, the nuclear missile crisis had us much closer to nuclear annihilation. We had people like, what was his name? Oh my God. He smoked the cigars. He organized the American firebombing of Japan, was also heavily involved in the American, the Curtis LeMay. We had Curtis LeMay in the ear of the president of the United States telling him, bomb him, go into Cuba, just kill them all. Even when Kennedy de-escalated the situation and brought it to a close, and he was rewarding everyone and was thanking them and was giving them like the little like fake calendars with the 13 days, like, look, I'm gonna give you all like little gift bags to thank you for your time here. Curtis LeMay was still yelling at him like, they've beaten us by us not invading Cuba and getting them out of there. They've beaten us. We were much closer at that period, and I don't want to underplay how crazy it was that Curtis LeMay used to be in such a high position of authority, not only in the U.S. Air Force, but also when it came to strategic command and the actual use of nuclear weapons, and how he was launching spy planes into the Soviet Union, like clearly violating their airspace, and what many historians say was a deliberate provocations that the Soviets didn't respond to, and that they're happy that the Soviets didn't respond to. But I just want to make it clear that there's nobody like that in the White House today that's like talking to Joe Biden saying, attack them, just bomb Moscow, bomb them. We don't have any advisors in Joe Biden circles saying that. The closest you can get is Lindsey Graham going on The View saying that if the Russians do a nuclear attack in Ukraine, they'll consider it an attack on a NATO country because of the radiation spillover and how it can affect nation states like Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Romania. That's the closest you can get. It's not anywhere near him directly just saying, bomb them now, bomb them. Just want to give a little bit of a historical, perspective here.
It seems like there's a pretty significant downside to this particular foreign policy decision, starting with economic collapse and ending potentially with extinction.
The idea that America's economic woes are primarily caused by sanctions that we've placed on the Russian Federation are just silly. not even a country that we got a majority of our energy exports from. We produce a lot of energy ourselves. It contributed somewhat, but it's definitely not the lion's share of the economic woes that we're dealing with. Like I would, if this was like an audience, if this was for maybe, I don't know, like a Moldovan audience, maybe you'd have more of an argument, but this is for an American audience.
So is there a good reason we're doing it? So many innocent young people have been killed. So many hundreds of billions of dollars have been wasted, some of them from the US Treasury. So what's the point?
This is the thing that gets me. Hundreds of billions of dollars have been wasted. I don't even know what he's referring to. When they say hundreds of billions of dollars, I'm thinking about US aid. Now, currently, I think US military aid to Ukraine sits roughly around $50 billion. Roughly. And that's if we're counting everything and we're being as giving the littlest amount of scrutiny. Like, we're counting the aid that hasn't arrived. We're counting some of the replacements, which isn't really fair because if it's not being sent to Ukraine, how can we possibly count it as US aid? Whatever. Then you include the humanitarian aid, right? So I would say that humanitarian aid for Ukraine has not been wasted. It's been used to help people from, dying. And when we talk about, air defense and stuff like that, that has also helped people from not dying. But the aid which has helped Ukraine liberate tons and tons and tons of territory, whether it be around Kharkiv, whether it be the city of Kherson from occupation, that's not wasted aid. That was weapons used in the liberation of Ukrainian territory, used to restore democratic rule, which I know we're going to get into democracy in Ukraine in a moment, democratic rule to these areas, to restore Ukrainian national sovereignty to these areas, which in these areas that were liberated, we'd uncovered horrific atrocities, including the largest mass grave discovered in Europe since the Yugoslav genocides in Izium, over 440 bodies in a mass grave. And that's just one location. There's mass graves like that all over the country. That was just a particularly brutal, singular example of it in Izium. So you could say, oh, we wasted all that money. Wasted it how? Was the liberation of that territory around Kharkiv not a success? Was the liberation of Kherson not a success? Is shooting down missiles that could strike children's hospitals not a success? When he says wasted, what does he mean by that? Number one, the numbers that he gives, bullshit, and wasted. I don't know how he defines wasted, but I don't think it was wasted.
Are we really doing this so the Biden family can repay its debts to the oligarchs who financed their beach house in Rehoboth?
I don't know, man. This is the problem with Tucker Carlson, and this is the main reason why I despise watching him, is when he says something like this. What am I even supposed to say? We have no evidence that any conversations about beach homes in Rehoboth ever came up in conversations with the Zelensky administration. We have no documents that proves that the aid sent over to Ukraine, which has been congressionally approved, by the way. So not only did you get the Biden administration to sign on to the scheme to pay back these homes in Rehoboth, but you've gotten all of Congress, including Republicans, outside of maybe like Matt Gaetz and a few others, signing on to this as well. You've gotten the majority of the American public. You've gotten basically the majority of European nation states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania as well, all signing on to because they all care about Joe Biden's beach home in Rehoboth. It's just nonsense. It's just vague speculation. And that's I think like half of Tucker Carlson segments. It's just vague speculation. He's like, here's an interesting fact. What do we think about that? And he doesn't directly say this is what's the case, or he'll just speculate, isn't that interesting? And just kind of leave it up to interpretation.
We're doing it so our government can continue to lie about its illicit biolabs in Eastern Europe?
Again, this is just nonsense. Not only does he not provide any evidence here of biolabs in Eastern Europe that we're supposedly lying about, but this is like just direct Russian propaganda. And this is like propaganda that us as Americans should not especially be falling for. We are especially stupid for falling for this, if you believe this. We were told that we were invading Iraq to stop these weapons of mass destructions from being made and then being used against other states. And Dick Cheney said he didn't want the warning sign, or he didn't want the evidence to end up being a mushroom cloud, and trying to make people think that Iraq had a nuclear arsenal that they could use against the United States, and if they didn't act, the next 9/11 will be a mushroom cloud in New York City. It'll be a nuclear bomb going off. We invade Iraq, didn't find nothing. I think we found some chemical weapons, but we didn't find anything close to what Dick Cheney was insinuating was in Iraq. And explicitly stating on multiple occasions, the Bush administration was stating was in Iraq. No weapons of mass destruction. Now, 20 years later, by the way, Tucker Carlson supported the Iraq invasion. I do want to put that out there. And he supported it when it counted, before it happened. Then after it happened, he pulled his support. Now, 20 years later, Russia invades Ukraine, claiming that Ukraine is designing weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, to target Russians, to target their DNA and kill them in mass. What evidence do they provide? Well, not really anything. They don't really provide any physical evidence. And a year and a half to almost 2 years into the war, they have still yet to show these grand weapons that were created by the Ukrainians, even though they've occupied a decent portion of the country. But we still have Tucker Carlson, a year and a half into the war, repeating this nonsense. Even if he doesn't go into the specifics, he'll just kind of like dabble in it, dip his toes a little bit, and then he'll move on to the next topic, not really addressing any of the specifics. Because if you get bogged down in the specifics of whether these chemical weapons are real, whether these biological weapons are real that he's talking about, these weapons of mass destruction are real, he just kind of be like, isn't that something? Biological facilities, and then moves on. As if there aren't tons of biological facilities all around the world doing research on tons of different things that could be a million different things outside of weapons of mass destruction. We have biological facilities in Canada. We have biological facilities in Mexico, in Germany, in France, in Denmark, in places all around the world. And the Russians have yet to provide any concrete proof of them being used to develop weapons. But Tucker Carlson, the journalist with just the most integrity, doesn't need that evidence to just suggest it on his program. Definitely now that there's no Fox censor to tell him, I don't know, should we lie 10 times today? Can we just lie 8 times today? And we just started, man. We're not even a minute in.
So that flabby losers like Toria Nuland and Tony Blinken can feel like they're doing something important with their sad, empty lives? Really? Honestly, there's got to be a better reason for waging this, the most pointless war of all.
The most pointless war of all. From whose perspective? I think it's saying it like from our perspective, that it is the most pointless war of all. It is pointless for the Ukrainians to retake their territory. It is pointless for the Ukrainians to not want to be dumped in mass graves. It is pointless for the Ukrainians to want to retain their sovereignty. It is pointless for Ukrainians to want to have their national identity and not have it tranced upon and denied and erased. It is pointless to fight back against the illegal deportation of Ukrainian children. All of it, it's just all pointless, all silly. I wonder if you would have the same message of like, well, when you think about it, maybe Hawaii is historical Chinese clay. And if the Chinese want to have it, it would be kind of pointless to fight back. I just want to see how consistent he would have these narratives if, the situation was flipped. And I'm just saying Hawaii, we would need to take about 20 to 30% of American territory to get to the equivalent of what we're having with Russia happen right now in Ukraine. So what, California, Colorado, New Vegas, not New Vegas, not the video game, Nevada, all this territory just taken up? Would he say, it would be pointless to try to take that back? Especially if mass graves were popping up in occupied California? Get out of here.
What is it? Well, thankfully, we have an answer.
Well, we have an answer. Guys, Tucker Carlson has figured out geopolitics. He figured it out for all of us. Okay, he knows the true reason behind the war. The true, point, expressive thumbnail, oh my God, the truth unveiled. He's got it. Let's see.
The war against Russia, ladies and gentlemen, the war against
Russia, not the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the war against Russia. Okay.
Against Putin and for Ukraine is in fact a war for democracy. Watch and recall the motive.
The president has said many times.
By the way, I don't like the simplification of like why we're supporting Ukraine. There's a million different reasons why the United States is supporting Ukraine. There's a million different reasons why Ukrainians are fighting back. Democracy is one of those reasons, but so is sovereignty. So are the atrocities. So are the liberation of their territory and the reclamation of their home, as many of them have been placed for a very long time. I interviewed a Ukrainian recently. I wasn't recently. It was like a few months ago, who has been displaced by Crimea, and they're fighting in the Ukrainian military so they can literally just get back their home that was taken from them in 2014. And now with everybody being forced to have Russian passports and everybody being denied the Ukrainian identity in occupied territory, as they're about to engage in a campaign of mass deportations of anybody who will not take a Russian passport, taking their property from them, stripping them of their property rights. They have a good reason to fight. They have a lot of reasons to fight. The upholding of their democratically elected government against the Russian invasion is just one aspect, one reason of many reasons why Ukrainians are fighting.
Times we're focused on what we can do to support Ukraine's effort to fight for their democracy.
Democracy must prevail. The Ukrainian people are fighting the fight for their democracy, and in doing so, for ours as well.
Assisting and helping Ukraine win this fight for democracy and freedom.
And of course, Ukrainian President Zelensky understands that what's at stake in Ukraine is bigger than just his nation. It is literally a battle for freedom and democracy themselves.
They are showing the world what an existential fight for democracy looks like.
President Zelensky and the Ukrainians have changed the course of history for the better, and we unequivocally are with the Ukrainian people in their fight to remain a sovereign democracy.
Unequivocally with the Ukrainian people to remain a democracy. It's a bipartisan view. Democracy must prevail. You just heard noted democracy expert Nancy Pelosi say, the daughter of the mobbed-up mayor of Baltimore. As Pelosi puts it, the Ukrainian people are fighting the fight for their democracy and for ours as well. That's right, for ours as well. Without Ukrainian democracy...
I mean, I don't know how much of it's for ours as well, but I mean... There's a question about like encroaching like authoritarianism, but I think it's mostly for Ukrainian democracy.
Democracy, in other words, we can have no democracy.
And also to show like the strength of democracy internationally. Like if the democratic countries, when democracies are threatened, just kind of say, it is what it is, doesn't show the democratic system to be that very, strong, palatable.
The fight for their democracy and for ours as well. That's right, for ours as well. Without Ukrainian democracy, in other words, we can have no democracy here. If the Ukrainian...
What? Who said that? Nobody that he just listened to said that. Nobody said that if Ukraine loses, America will lose its democracy. But it is true that if Ukraine loses, America will look quite weak. The West will, what is called the West, will look quite weak. Democracy and liberal democracy will look very weak and like it cannot defend itself. And I think it will embolden many authoritarians around the world and in the countries that are in liberal democracies who want to get rid of that liberal democracy. But I don't think that necessarily means that American democracy itself will collapse. I don't believe in some type of like domino theory going on in Europe where Ukraine falls and everyone else falls necessarily. But it is also true that Russian goals don't stop with Ukraine. And there's other countries that they believe that they have the right to do this exact same thing too. That the Russian government believes that they can do it too if they want to, or at least they have the right to.
Ukrainians aren't free, neither are we. We must make sure they can vote in Kiev so we can continue to vote in Kansas City. It's really that simple.
Not that simple, but whatever.
And yet tonight, we regret to tell you that we have a problem. It looks like they're not going to be able to vote in Kiev anymore. And no, for once, it's not Putin's fault.
Anymore. Wow. So there's no more voting in Ukraine. It's done. They've no more votes allowed. Voting is done in Ukraine. No more voting. No voting anymore. Okay, let's hear it. Let's see the evidence.
Democracy in Ukraine seems to be suspended by the world's...
Suspended? I thought it was no more. Okay, well now I guess it's back. Okay, it's in a coma. It's no longer gone. It was gone for a second. Now it's back. It's on a coma. It's in a coma. It's got in a car accident or something.
Most democracy advocate himself, Field Marshal Zelensky.
Field Marshal.
Watch this.
Will there be elections in Ukraine next year? This is a global question. If we win, there will be. So there will be no wartime martial law, no war. Elections should be held in peacetime when there is no war, according to the law. Okay, so I want to hear what Tucker Carlson's interpretation of this is, and then I'll explain to you how martial law in Ukraine works, the Ukrainian constitution, and what it has been like since the nation was independent of the Soviet Union since 1991.
So when you have an election, well, he says if we win, we'll let people vote. Otherwise, no. You vote when we feel like it, because ultimately we're completely in charge and make all the rules. Your job is to obey or be punished. That's our version of self-government.
What the where did that interpretation come from? That's not what Zelensky said at all. He just put the words on screen, and then you just like completely twisted them into something he didn't say. So, for those of you who don't know, sorry, we'll let him keep going, and then because he likes to go. I don't want to. Maybe he'll bring it up before I bring it up.
Self means me. I'm the government. Now that's not just any autocrat. That's our chief ally in the war for democracy. This is the guy who just announced he's likely to cancel next year's elections. So you've got to wonder what the Biden administration thinks of this. We can't possibly continue to support Zelensky, that guy, after he said that, can we? Because in a clip less than 30 seconds long, he just blew up our entire rationale for supporting his side in the war. So we can't support him. Oh, of course we can. And we will. Here's Joe Biden from yesterday reaffirming America's unequivocal support for Ukraine.
No matter what happened in Russia, we, the United States, will continue to support Ukraine's defense and its sovereignty and its territorial integrity.
So to recap, we are currently fighting a war for democracy on behalf of a leader who just casually announced he's happy to end democracy, and our democracy-supporting leaders have no problem with that. In fact, they're strongly for it. Shocked? You shouldn't be. Of course they're for it. You should have seen this coming. Wars for democracy always cancel democracy in the process. That's why our leaders love them. And they all do it, even the virtuous leaders. Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. The British government under Winston Churchill threw an entire opposition party into prison and let them rot for the duration, in some cases with their families. So,
Okay, so I'm done. He's moving off of the point. He didn't mention it. I think I have to mention it then, since Tucker Carlson left out some vital information. Can you believe that? So the Ukrainian constitution, as written in 1991, clearly states that elections could be suspended, or elections would be suspended in the instance of martial law, and then elections would take place, and whatever government was elected when martial law went into place will stay in place until martial law ends, and they can have democratic elections. And Ukraine avoided enacting martial law for a very, very long time, to a point long enough that it could suspend elections. In 2014, when Ukraine was invaded and Crimea was annexed, they still had elections. Petro Poroshenko was elected democratically in Ukraine. And then over his administration, as he started to leave office, and the anti-terrorist operation, which is what they called it, their counteroffensive against the Russians in Donetsk and Luhansk was unable to push them out, they still did not suspend elections. They did not enact martial law long enough in order to say, okay, elections are not going to be happening. And then Zelensky was elected, as monitored by multiple election monitors, credible election monitors, multiple organizations, with exit polling matching the results. Zelensky was elected on a generally semi-pro-peace platform. The idea that they wanted to find a negotiated settlement to the war. Then during Zelensky's administration, Ukraine is completely invaded. They try to conquer all of the country. And that is when martial law is enacted. And the 1991 version of the Ukrainian constitution kind of kicks in the gear. And they say, okay, until this war is over, martial law has been declared. In order to win a war, you need like a consistency of administration. You need a strong government. We are going to have the current party in place until the war is over. Once the war is over, we'll hold an election. Now, he mentions Winston Churchill, but he doesn't mention something that I think we could compare this very easily to from World War II. He mentions the other thing, and I think if he mentioned the other thing that they talk about when they mention British democracy during World War II, he might look a little, his argument might look a little worse. During World War II, elections in Great Britain were suspended because they were fighting a war for their survival and the survival of democracy in Europe. That's not one of those, we're talking about democracy, so I might as well just drop that there. That's not the only reason they were fighting, a million reasons they were fighting, but that was one of the reasons they were fighting. And they suspended elections until the war was over, and then Winston Churchill was swiftly kicked out of office. Labor won a huge wave, and then they built the foundations for things like the National Health Service, and that would shape the modern British political landscape. Why do we have any reason to believe that in Ukraine that would not be the same exact thing that happens? This was something that was in the Ukrainian constitution already, that in an instance where the nation has to declare martial law for a situation like this, a situation of national survival, they will suspend elections until it is calmed down enough so that they can unsuspend elections, and then they'll have elections. Just like the United Kingdom did during World War II, just like many other democracies would do in the same exact position that Ukraine was in. But now, Tucker Carlson is not only leaving out the information about the Ukrainian constitution, he's just making it sound like Zelensky came out one day and said, no more elections. Elections are canceled. Even though if he wants to maintain martial law, there's a lot of things he can't do. Not one thing is he can't have elections. Another thing he can't do is change the Constitution. A lot of people have been hounding him to change certain aspects of the Constitution. And he has announced multiple times, I can't do that because we would need our legislator to vote on it, and we can't change, the legislator cannot change the Constitution during martial law. Martial law would have to be ended, the war would have to be won, the war would have to be over for us to be able to change these things. This is something that's been in the Ukrainian constitution for a long time now. He doesn't mention that. He tries to paint it as if Zelensky just kind of randomly announced elections are canceled and some dictatorial power grab in order to completely dominate the political landscape permanently. He's now the dictator of Ukraine. Even though the same thing has happened in the United Kingdom before, it's happened in other locations. He doesn't use this example in the United Kingdom. He uses a different example of Winston Churchill. I think he didn't use the more direct comparison, because maybe it would have made him look worse if it's like, hey, actually, it's pretty common for a nation state to suspend electoral politics, or at least elections, until wartime is ended, until their nation is no longer occupied. That's not such a crazy concept, and it certainly isn't the announcement of the end of democracy. It certainly isn't that. You can disagree with it even. You could even say that even though hosting elections during wartime is incredibly difficult, you would have to completely change how Ukraine does elections. You would have to make it so you get all the soldiers to vote, you get all the people in displaced territories to vote, areas people displaced from the country. So you got to get the ones in America and France and Germany and Poland. You got to get them to vote, make sure displaced people can vote. You're going to have to either accept that those in occupied territory don't get to vote, or you're going to have to find some other way for them to vote, something I haven't been able to figure out yet. So most likely you're going to accept that those in occupied territory don't get the vote, and you're going to have to do all of this while under fire, right? You can believe that, and you can think that is the correct position for Ukraine to take. I know Socialism Done Left, Sock Done Left on Twitter, that's something he believes. But you cannot take the situation and extrapolate it to Ukrainian democracy is dead. If that was the case, he would have to be consistent and say there is no British democracy. British democracy is dead. It died while Winston Churchill was in office. Or we could point to Abraham Lincoln. He used Abraham Lincoln as a direct example, the suspension of habeas corpus. Is American democracy dead? No, it is not. American democracy did not die after the Civil War was won. And lastly, the idea that Ukraine likes the war because it means he can stay in power is absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely silly, unless he has some larger piece of evidence besides the Ukrainian constitution being abided by. Then I'm just going to completely disregard it as nonsense and just pure speculation, which is, again, 50% of every Tucker Carlson program is just pure speculation.
A war for democracy, you can do anything. Imagine what a man might do who has fewer principles. If that man, say, ran Ukraine, he might seize churches, arrest priests, ban all criticism of himself, disappear his political opponents.
Hello, my name is Dylan Patrick Burns. I'm 22 years old. I'm from Maryland, the United States, in College Park. I think when it comes to Zelensky's domestic policy, he's kind of a neo-lib cuck. His policies on labor are absolutely terrible. The way that the administration has treated teachers is, I think, with complete disregard, especially under work time conditions. I believe that they have not managed the privatization of Ukraine well, and using the war in some ways to go after labor, as the administration has done, in trying to whittle down labor protections for big companies, for big business, is bad. It's gross. I think that's dog doo-doo. Bad. If you would actually sit me down and bring me through Zelensky's policies, I would probably disagree with at least 40% of it. Maybe 30 to 40%, like a decent portion of it. You can say that in Ukraine. That isn't illegal in Ukraine. That isn't. I don't know why you said you can't criticize Zelensky. Yes, you can. Zelensky doo-doo. What am I gonna get? What's gonna happen? Are they gonna come? Dylan, you've been arrested. Why have you been arrested? You said you disagree with Zelensky on labor policy. All hail the cult of Zelensky. When people get arrested in Ukraine, you know what they get arrested for if it's for speech? It's for calling the Russians and telling them where Ukrainian positions are, which obviously is treason. You're going to get arrested for, or you're directly denying, like Bucha was done by the Russians. Oh, Bucha was done by the Ukrainians. They were all slaughtered by the Ukrainians. Fuck those victims in Bucha. I don't care. I hope more die. Stuff like that will get you arrested by the SBU. So I don't know where this idea that's criticism against Zelensky is now illegal. It's just nonsense. That's the first thing. When it comes to the churches, I think he's talking about the Russian Orthodox Church. I disagree with some of the actions that the Ukrainian government has taken against the Russian Orthodox Church, but nobody in Western media has painted the picture correctly. All of them just say, look at these churches that were just, saying we love Jesus, and then Zelensky was like, I hate Jesus, and then came in and like took all the churches away. Can you believe that? Can you believe it? That's not what happened. The head of the Russian, let me just say that again, Russian Orthodox Church said that if you go to Ukraine and you die killing Ukrainians, you will go to heaven. That's like close to like a call for jihad, man. A call for jihad against Ukraine. Now, the United States government has killed people for radical preaching in the Middle East with drone strikes. In fact, I believe Donald Trump has actually done that. His candidate that he supports. But Ukraine, not even, by the way, expelling all these churches, a lot of them still operate on Ukrainian soil. Not expelling all these priests. A lot of them still operate on Ukrainian soil. But he's going to say that that is showing that Ukraine is a dictatorship when he hasn't even taken these things into consideration. A lot of nation states would do the exact same thing that the Ukrainian state did in its position, even if I disagree with it. See, I'm an American. I'm a freedom tard. I'm 100% on religious freedom, 100% on freedom of expression when it comes to government interference. And when I'm in Europe, that doesn't align with a lot of the European nation states that have been. And definitely when they talk about symbology around World War II, either the Soviet or Nazi symbology. But are we really going to say that because what? They are criticizing them and talking about legislation to curtail the power of the church, which the head of said church is calling for a jihad against Ukraine? We're going to say you're no longer a democracy? I don't know, man. That seems pretty silly to me. And heavily when, again, the guy he supported wanted to ban burning the American flag. Okay? Just saying.
That's happening. Just last month, Zelensky threw a man called Gonzalo Lira into prison indefinitely for the crime of daring to write about the Ukrainian government in unflattering ways. Now, what's interesting, what separates...
Did Tucker Carlson just name drop Coach Red Pill? Gonzalo Lira? And that's all the information he gives on who Gonzalo Lira is? Okay, so many of you in my community will already know who Gonzalo Lira is. So a lot of this is kind of just me hitting the old tunes, okay? But Gonzalo Lira is a former pickup artist who has been living in Ukraine, and while within Ukraine, he has been denying every single atrocity that the Russians have done, denying that they did Bucha, denying that they did really any atrocity. Then he blames it on the Ukrainians. No, yeah, the Jews marched themselves in the gas chambers. Yeah. Then, not only would he do that, He would call for stronger action, stronger bombing, more bombardments, more attacks on Ukraine, more bombing of Ukrainian cities. He would call for this on his program. While within a Ukrainian city, that is, while his neighbors were dealing with these types of bombardments, these types of strikes. Then the SBU goes to him, detains him for a bit and tells him, look, we can either let you out, let you leave the country, or we can keep you here and you'll most likely be tried after the war. Either way, though, if you're staying within Ukraine, you have to stop calling for the country to be bombed, and you have to stop denying all these war crimes and trying to pin it on the Ukrainians when we have overwhelming evidence that the Russians did it. Then they let him go. And he continues to do it for like another year before eventually the SBU says that's enough. They raid his house and then they arrest him, and he's been detained ever since. So he says, what did he classify Gonzalo Lira's words as?
And that's happening. Just last month, Zelensky threw a man called Gonzalo Lira into prison indefinitely for the crime of daring to write about the Ukrainian government in unflattering ways.
That's how he defines it. You know, he just wrote about it in unflattering ways. But then you tune into his stream, it's like, yes, the Russians need to bomb them more. They need to attack. They need to be more aggressive. The Russians will win. They will occupy all of Ukraine. He's like drawing up maps where Ukraine loses like half of its territory. No, or like almost all of its territory. And he's denying all these war crimes. He is not painting a good picture of what Gonzalo Lira actually did. Now, you can still be a free speech absolutist and say, even under those circumstances, you don't want him to be arrested. But when a guy in your country, while your country is being invaded, is calling for your country to be invaded harder, as mass graves are popping up around the country, a lot of democracies would have done the same thing in Ukraine's place. And as he mentioned, we have done things like that before in the United States. During World War II, the suspension of habeas corpus by Abraham Lincoln. Would he say that American democracy died in 1861?
Now, what's interesting...
Well, actually, he might say American democracy died in 1865 when a certain cause lost. But anyway, continuing.
Separates this from other such cases is that Lira is an American citizen. So Joe Biden, who is quite a bit of SWAT, as they say in Ukraine, could have freed Gonzalo Lira within hours. But he didn't. He didn't want to. He didn't say a word about it.
Most people didn't want to. Most people, because this is the problem with Gonzalo Lira, and it really doesn't help his case, is the dude's also just like a massive cunt. And I mean this in like, I'm not even trying to be mean. He just is. The way he acts is just gigantic cunty vibes. Where, let me just give you an example. I remember he went out in public on Twitter and he started saying, no one will debate me. None of these libtards will debate me. No one. No one will come on my program to debate me. And so I come forward. I'm like, okay, here are 5 times you lied. You lied about Bucha, and you continue to lie about Bucha. You lie about this, you lie about that. And apparently, that was not the debate he wanted to have. I get blocked. He does agree, though, to debate Destiny and Laserpick, 2 popular internet creators. And the debate was a gigantic mess. I think we've watched it on the show before. I did a reaction to it on my second channel, DylanBurnsLIVE, if you want to go see it. He did a PowerPoint presentation and just expected them to sit in the audience as he brings slide after slide after slide, just being like, here's why you guys are stupid. Here's why you guys are wrong. Here's why you guys are imbeciles. He didn't want to have a debate. He wanted to lecture to 2 people. And Destiny like jumped out like 30 minutes in. He's like, this is stupid. I'm out of it. Laserpig instead stayed in for 2.5 hours, got drunk off his ass, just seeing how much he could like drag out the spool on Gonzalo. This is the type of productive dialogue that Gonzalo Lira tried to promote. The dude was a cunt, so nobody likes him. That's the first problem. Most people don't like him because he's an asshole. Number 2, he calls for Ukraine to get bombed and attacked and destroyed constantly. And number 3, he tries to help the Kremlin cover up its war crimes. A little bit different than, I think Zelensky's economic policy is very bad, or I actually think that the war is wasteful. That's not what he said. Let's not paint it like that.
He remains in prison tonight. So that makes you wonder, what's the real motive here? When normal people see war, they see death.
See, as we all knew, up until right now, the only motive anyone ever talked about when it came to Ukraine was democracy. And now that he's Now Tucker Carlson has thoroughly took the lib cucks and thrashed them around. He's figured it out. He's got the real reason they don't want you to know. It isn't a very complicated geopolitical event with a million different factors and interests pulling at the seams. No. He's got the one and only solution. Let's see. Let's hear it out. I hate stuff like this. I despise it. I despise people who will go on the internet and be like, it's all, look, you know this really complicated issue? No. It's got a simple solution that it's been hidden from you by the elites. And I'm the one with the truth and the true answer as a non-expert in the field.
Death and destruction, sadness and suffering. But that's not what demagogues see. They understand it differently. They know that war means power, mostly for them. During wartime, everything they do can be justified. War is the gravest of all emergencies. Imagine the COVID lockdowns times 1,000 plus drones.
I like that, you know, and I mean, this is slightly mean to Tucker's audience. I like that Tucker knows that Americans, even a lot of American veterans, don't really know what war's like. Because even the ones that would have the most close relationship with war veterans, many of them, and I don't mean to be mean, are like pencil pushers, or, you know, they run logistics, or if they have been deployed, they haven't seen battle, or if they have seen battle, the type of battle they've seen are completely different, right? The idea of not having air superiority for an American Marine sounds ridiculous, right? It's something that they might have to prepare for, but it's not something that they've ever experienced in their lifetime. The only people that could have ever experienced it are probably veterans from like World War II. And even then, we had pretty overwhelming air power, late war. But because Americans are so separated from war, he has to be like, war is like when COVID locked down, but drones. He has to dumb it down as much as physically possible. War is like COVID lockdown, but drones. That's my favorite Tucker Carlsonism.
Once war breaks out, politicians become gods with the power of life and death. So in a peaceful democracy, you have to debate your political opponents in public, and that's tiresome. But in a war for democracy, you can just throw them in jail or have them executed. You can see that.
Okay, so before the war, Zelensky would have debated Gonzalo when he said that all these, what does that even, I don't, whatever. He would debate Gonzalo Lira. Like, actually, Gonzalo, I don't think that we should all be bombed. Brave, stunning. Yeah, usually during wartime, you can ignore those clowns. But during wartime, if they're spreading misinformation, a lot of democracies, even if you personally disagree with it, are not going to take so kindly to people calling for the country to be bombed while within that country. It's also just very difficult to, Zelensky's going to be like, okay, everybody, so this guy, he's going to pardon him. This is what Zelensky does. He pardons Gonzalo, and then people are like, why'd you pardon him? He's like, look, I know this guy called for you guys to be bombed. I know this guy lied about your people being slaughtered. I know this guy tried to pretend he was doing on-the-ground journalism when he was just hiding in his Kharkiv apartment for the entirety of the war, messaging about how great Putin was and how Ukraine needs to be cut up and divided. But freedom of expression. The freedom to call for your neighbors to be murdered. And I don't know, man. It's gonna be pretty hard to convince any society in the world to do that.
Many in Washington are looking forward to that moment. And that may be why they so fervently support Joe Biden, even many Republicans, against a potential opponent, the only opponent who opposes the war in Ukraine. If you were to end the war, their power would evaporate. Last week, a whistleblower produced WhatsApp messages from Hunter Biden, proving that at the very least, his father knew about his influence peddling businesses abroad and probably participated in them. Quote, I'm sitting here with my father, Hunter Biden wrote.
This is really all going to go back to the real reason we're fighting the war in Ukraine is corruption. That's the real reason. That's the reason that nobody will understand. I mean, all of Europe and the Ukrainian people have signed up on a crusade for Hunter Biden's cocaine habit and in honor of his gigantic schlong.
To his Chinese partners demanding money. As much as anything reported about the Bidens over the last several years, this was the smoking gun.
By the way, I haven't looked into this at all, these WhatsApp messages. Can we look up WhatsApp messages, Hunter Biden? Hunter Biden attorney says WhatsApp messages cited by Republicans is fake. Well, that's his attorney. I don't want to listen to his attorney, right? But it's just more of that. His attorney. What's this? This is Fox. Messages that make Biden's the goats of corruption. An opinion piece. Oh, that's great. What did his attorney even say? The attorney for Hunter Biden says purported screenshots of a text message from Hunter Biden to a potential Chinese business partner where he refers to Joe Biden. And wait, so they didn't even talk about Ukraine? They talked about China. This is the Chinese. That's a different country. What? Okay, whatever. A message that has been the subject of intense scrutiny following the statements made by the IRS whistleblower are not real and contain a myriad of issues. Ab Laurel, one of Hunter Biden's attorneys, made the statement in a letter to Representative Jason Smith, chairman of the House and Ways and Means Committee, which has interviewed the whistleblowers. And the letter was obtained by NBC News. IRS Supervisory Special Agent Gary Shapley told the committee under oath that as an investigator for the IRS, he obtained messages that Hunter Biden sent on the WhatsApp platform, including one in 2017 that he read demanding payment from a Chinese businessman named Henry Zhao. By the way, why is this even coming up for Ukraine? This is a totally different country. But okay, I don't know. Whatever. It always has to be about Hunter Biden, no matter what. It's always Hunter Biden. It's always corruption. It can't be that the Ukrainian people actually want to run their own country. It can't be an issue about sovereignty. It can't even be that they want to just like quarter the Russians. It has to be some big corruption scale. There has to be something more. You have to know some hidden truth. There has to be something revealed. There has to be something that can get you clicks on the internet. In the message, Shapley said Biden appeared to suggest that he was sitting with his father, then the former vice president, saying, "I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction." Attorney for Shapley said in a statement, Biden family lawyers have resorted to intimidation before, reportedly threatening federal prosecutors with career suicide if they charge Hunter Biden. So this attempt to intimidate our client and the oversight authorities scrutinizing politicization of this case is no surprise. Laura writes that the screenshots of the messages as tweeted by Smith both include a photo of Mr. Biden, not from 2017, but from that White House Easter egg roll in April of 2022, long after the purported message was sent. Both images portray the message in a blue bubble. When WhatsApp messages are in green, one image superimposed the Chinese flag for a contact ID, when surely that was not how a text or contact was kept, and one purports to be a screenshot with the ... of someone composing a text as an Apple's iMessage when that does not happen on WhatsApp. Oh, well, that doesn't... Okay, well, I didn't want to listen to her attorney at first, but these are all pretty valid points. Okay, well, otherwise, I don't... It's unconfirmed if it's real. It seems to be the case. Does anybody know in my chat, by the way, if it's confirmed to be real or not? Because I've seen like Twitter threads on it, but I've just ignored them because I've been busy. I will take chat's word over Tucker's word any day of the week. I will. I have that little trust of the man that I would even trust gutter chat over Tucker Carlson. By the way, I'm not even going to object to the idea that the Biden family could have been involved in corruption. That's not an insane thing to think. When Biden's been involved in politics for so long, corruption is a real thing that many wealthy people participate in. And, you know, it would be something that Hunter Biden should be charged for if he was involved in doing. But I don't see how this connects to Ukraine at all. I don't see it at all.
There it is, right there in the message. That would have been enough to cripple a normal president. It would have been more than enough to keep a normal
unconfirmed WhatsApp message. Okay, sure. Okay.
President from running for office again. But it had virtually no effect on Joe Biden. Most media outlets ignored it completely.
Damn, steely-chinned Joe Biden. Invincible. Joe Biden.
Tried to spin Biden's relationship with his son as some kind of moral victory. Quote, "The real meaning of the Hunter Biden saga, as I see it," wrote Nick Kristof of the New York Times, "isn't about presidential corruption, but is about how widespread addiction is, and about how a determined parent with unconditional love can sometimes reel a child back." He actually wrote that. And if you doubt it, you should know that view was common. Here's the take from ABC.
The Hunter Biden story.
Why are we concentrating on Hunter Biden? What does this have to do with Ukraine? Is it just going to go back to the Ukrainian prosecutor? Is it really going to go all the way back to that? Is this going to be the hook that the real reason we're sending all of this aid over to Ukraine is solely to protect Hunter Biden's image? That's the theory? That's the amount of influence Hunter Biden has? That he doesn't only have sway over the American government, But most of the EU and Korea, who has sent over 500,000 shells to replenish American stockpiles, Japan, which has also sent a substantial amount of aid, $5 billion at least. They're going to confirm even more aid in the future. Actually, I think well over $5 million. I think we're probably closer to 8 or 9 billion. But still, it would have to be such a global plot that Hunter Biden, who, I don't want to be mean, probably not the sharpest tool in the shed, right? Probably not the most intelligent person. I'm not saying he's necessarily super dumb, but I don't understand how he could organize this, you know? Just a very strong international support for Hunter Biden.
The scandal, the this, the that, it's also the story of a father's love. And Joe Biden has never and will never give up on his son Hunter, and will never treat him lesser than. And so he is a father first. Take it or leave it.
So a whistleblower produces a text message showing that Joe Biden was in the room with his son when his son was selling influence to an enemy power, the Chinese.
By the way, if you guys are like, why... If there's anybody who's out there is like, why are you doubting these WhatsApp images? Tucker Carlson has a history of lying. Like, just not even just a history of lying, but he has a habit of lying. So everything he says has to be taken with a gigantic grain of salt and an ask for a source. Problem is, Tucker Carlson isn't somebody who usually sources his claims or like cites his sources in any, like in his description or anything. Or if he's going to talk about something and he's going to be held down on something, he has openly admitted, I think it was on the Bubba the Love Sponge radio show, that he'll just pivot out. If he's ever cornered on anything, he will always pivot or even lie, and he admitted to this, lie to get out of it. Can we actually, let me see if I can find this. Let's see if I can find this clip. Tucker Carlson, I lie. Yeah, here it is. This is from the, this is only from 2 years ago. I thought it was from the Bubba the Love Sponge thing. Fox News host Tucker Carlson tells interviewer, I lie. Fox News host was speaking to Dave Rubin. The YouTube host and conservative author asked how Carlson felt about CNN host Brian Stelter, Chris Cuomo, and Don Lemon, who Rubin called clown people. Carlson said, I guess I would ask myself, like, I mean, I lie if I'm really cornered or something. I lie. I really try not to. I try never to lie on TV. It'd be one thing if he said, I pivot if I get cornered, because a lot of people pivot. It's another thing to not pivot out of the conversation because, like, I don't really know. I'm in choppy water here, so I'm going to get myself out of this convo. I'm going to move into an area where I'm more comfortable. It's one thing to do that. It's a totally another thing to be like, yeah, I lie. I really try not to. I try never to lie on TV. Come on, man. I just don't. I don't like lying. I certainly do it, you know, out of weakness or whatever. Anyway.
His government. And ABC's take on it, Joe Biden is a father first. Take it or leave it. What accounts for a response like that? Well, that's the way you talk when you've got...
Somebody just brought up a good point in chat, though. What if that interview was his one lie? Ever thought about that?
Nothing to fear from an upcoming presidential election. You don't even bother to think of an excuse for your candidate because you don't need to. Your country has electronic voting machines. Joe Biden got 81,282,916 votes in 2020, and you're pretty sure he can do it again. In fact, you know he can. You're not worried. But actually, they should be a little worried.
I am worried. I am worried. A million things could happen between now and election. Now and election day. Imagine, like, if another recession happens, that is something that could deliver Trump into the White House. If we go deep into the depths of a recession, it gets really bad economically. Yeah, that could something that I think could prop Trump into the White House. But I do think that considering Trump's propensity to explode and propensity to commit crimes and then brag about it on audio, I do think that he's not necessarily the best candidate to run against Joe Biden, but he is the most likely candidate that they're going to run against Joe Biden.
The people who control Joe Biden, Susan Rice and the rest, know they can continue to run our government, writing the press releases, formulating the policies, and they can do it effectively forever, as long as Joe Biden gets dressed in the morning. And of course, that's their strong preference. These are fervent opponents of change. But the one thing these people cannot control is aging.
Tucker Carlson, agent for change.
Joe Biden is old. He's 80 now. He will be 85 at the end of the next term. People imagine that old age is a long, predictable progression from acuity to permanent unconsciousness.
Okay, I just want to remind everyone, his candidate's Trump. Well, how old is Trump? How can we actually Google Trump's age? Trump's age. 77? Wait, Joe Biden's 80. That's only a 3-year difference. Well, what did the... Man, get Barron Trump versus Hunter, man. Let's make that the 2024 election.
But often that's not at all how it actually works. When old people start to slide, they tend to slide fast. Joe Biden has begun that descent. Here he was yesterday.
And here's what she wrote to me, and I quote, "You can imagine my joy. She called them right away, and the next day they sent someone out to survey her yard. As Beth wrote, this is the best thing that's happened to rural America since the Rural Electrification Act brought electricity to farms in the 30s and 40s. End of quote."
End of quote. You weren't supposed to hear that. Joe Biden read the stage directions out loud.
Wait, is that the best we could get? Is that... Look, there are a lot of embarrassing Joe Biden moments, right? But even I've slipped up on words like that before. This is the thing, right? I feel like they need to get 5 or 6 really bad gaffes from Joe Biden. Just stick to them. Because I think sometimes they just try to get so many and pile them on. And in an effort to pile on as many as possible, they take the weakest ones where he reads end of quote or unquote. Also, has no one ever heard end of quote before verbally? I've heard that before. I don't think that's that bad. Just show him falling down the stairs again, okay? That runs great with his base.
That's like eating the garnish that comes with your entree. You're supposed to know not to do that. Joe Biden no longer does. In a year or two, he will be gone completely. And
I love how that's all it's one video where Joe Biden says end of quote, and now that's evidence that in a year or two he will no longer have a mind. Again, man, 50%, and once you remember this, you can't unsee it. 50% of Tucker Carlson's show is just pure speculation.
There will be no hiding it. At that point, the Democratic Party will face a secession problem. If Joe Biden is reelected next year and then forced to leave office during his term due to disability or death, that means Kamala Harris will become president of the United States. And nobody wants that, not even her husband. In real life, nobody likes Kamala Harris. That's not an attack on her. In fact, it's possible to feel pity for someone who's so universally reviled. It is instead an observation of unchanging physical reality like gravity or photosynthesis. Nobody wants Kamala Harris to be president. No one will benefit if she becomes president. So logic suggests there's going to be a change. It's going to have to be somebody else. And whoever that person is going to have to enter the race soon, before the election, after Biden drops out. Who could that person be? We don't know, obviously. This is all just guessing. But we do know whoever that is will have to have 2 essential criteria.
The Democrats are not going to run with anybody else. It's going to be Joe Biden. It's like a foregone conclusion. When Bernie put his support behind Joe Biden, it was over. There's who else is going to run against Joe Biden and can win it? There's nobody could. I'm sorry, man. They could win in Robert Kennedy Jr. could win in New Hampshire and Iowa, and he'd still lose in South Carolina, and it would go just like the Bernie thing. It would just go just like Bernie. I was in South Carolina campaigning for Bernie. I tried so hard to get that man to be the nominee, and we got crushed. And we had a good operation in South Carolina. Not good enough. We should have tried to at least go to Jim Clyburn's barbecue, right? But we tried, man. They were sending us out like soldiers in vans, just dropping us off in the community, knock as many doors as possible, man. We got slaughtered. And you want to know what the DNC is doing right now, and they might succeed in doing? They might make it so South Carolina is the first primary. The first primary in the process. Is that cutthroat? Is that very clearly partisan in favor of Joe Biden? Absolutely. Absolutely it is, man. The Democratic Party is a brutal political machine. But it also means that there's just no way. Even before, the scenario was, well, maybe they can win in New Hampshire and and maybe they can win in Nevada, and then hopefully they could overcome the gigantic lead that Joe Biden has in somewhere like South Carolina. But if South Carolina is the first state, even that path is dead. And that path is already tremendously unlikely. Joe Biden is going to be the nominee for the Democrats unless he literally croaks.
He'll have to be as shallow, ruthless, and transactional as Joe Biden is, and he'll need to have flattery skills that are so polished and advanced they'd be considered superior even in the South.
Oh, by the way, I don't think the primary should start in South Carolina. I know the argument was, well, it's more diverse, but also they want to start with South Carolina because Joe Biden horribly underperformed in New Hampshire and horribly underperformed in Nevada. And starting with South Carolina could give the momentum into other states where he performed not as well the last time. I think that's the strategic reasoning. But if we're going to have an order of states, we should not change it to just help the incumbent. We should not just change the process to help the person that the Democrats kind of just want to win anyway. I don't think that's good. I think that degrades the integrity of the party. I think it's still a bad move. And that's not to say that Iowa should necessarily be the first state. It's just that I believe the intention in changing the state to South Carolina is biased in favor of Joe Biden, and I disagree with that.
Real court. And there's only one man in modern America who fits that description. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and perhaps not coincidentally, Joe Biden's new closest friend. I am here, Mr. President, Newsom told Biden at an event the two did together last week. I don't
know why we're talking about Gavin Newsom now. He got off of Ukraine so quickly. He was just like, Zelensky loves war because dictator, and that was it. And then he whined about Gonzalo Lira getting arrested. I don't know why we're on to Gavin Newsom. There's only a minute here left. I guess he just wanted to touch on everything. He just wanted to hit the greatest hits. It's like AC/DC coming out. Like, they might have a new song or two, but everyone wants to hear them, sing like Thunderstruck. Like, everybody wants that. Maybe that's what Tucker's doing. But the thing is about Gavin Newsom is I don't like Gavin Newsom that much. He's much too, I guess, I don't know what word to use besides neoliberally for my takes. Like, he's better than other people in the party, of course, but he wouldn't be my first pick. But I will say, when I talk to Republicans, especially Republicans that I know that work in Republican political PACs, they are freaking terrified of Gavin. Because they see how Gavin Newsom operates in Fox News interviews. They see how he is aggressive. They see how sharp he is in these interviews. They see how he's buying campaign ads in places like Florida to talk about the economic growth of California and to try to hit them in their own home turf. And that unsettles them. If I was a Republican, the last person I would want to run against, if we're talking about a list of Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Gavin Newsom, the top of that list I wouldn't want to run against is Gavin Newsom. Because the only thing I really think Republicans would amount to going to attacking Gavin on would be California. They would try to California's lawless. But besides that, dude's a campaign machine. He was made for the campaign trail. And I'm saying that as somebody who doesn't even really like Newsom.
I'm here as a proud American, as a proud Californian, mesmerized by not just your faith and your devotion to this country and the world we're trying to build, but by your results, by your action, by your passion, by your capacity to deliver. I am mesmerized.
Didn't Gavin have to survive a recall? He did, and he crushed it. He crushed the recall. It wasn't even close.
By you, Joe Biden? Imagine saying that as a compliment. You couldn't do it. Few human beings could do it. But Gavin Newsom had no problem at all. Those words rolled right off his forked tongue. He never stopped smiling. So if you're looking for the leader of the coup, there he is right there.
Okay, so Ukraine isn't a real democracy because of their constitution saying during martial law, you suspend elections until martial law is ended. Ukraine, the real reason we're giving aid to Ukraine is because of Hunter Biden, and Gavin Newsom's going to coup the party. Fantastic. As incomprehensible as always. What am I even supposed to say to that? Like, what am I even supposed to say to half of that shit? What?